Hi, today we follow Burna Boy and how a voice rooted in Nigeria reached global stages without losing the sound of home. This is a story about identity, rhythm, pressure, ambition, family memory, and the difficult work of becoming international without becoming empty. It is not a story about copying the world. It is a story about carrying where you come from into rooms that may not understand it yet. If you stay with it, you will see how culture can become confidence when an artist refuses to make himself smaller. Chapter 1. A Sound Before the Spotlight. Before the awards, before the stadiums, and before the global headlines, there was a boy named Demini Ogulu, growing up in Port Harcourt, Nigeria. Long before the world called him Burna Boy, he was surrounded by a country where music was not only entertainment. Music was memory, street energy, celebration, protest, family, language, and movement. Nigeria is not one simple sound. It is many sounds living together. Highlife, Afrobeat, dancehall, reggae, hip-hop, gospel, local rhythms, and everyday street language can meet in one city and create something alive. For a young listener, that mix can become a classroom without walls. You do not only hear music, you learn how people speak when they are proud, tired, joyful, angry, hopeful, and free. Burna Boy's story begins inside that kind of atmosphere. He did not enter music as a clean product designed for a global market. He came from a place with heat, humor, confidence, struggle, and rhythm. That matters because his later success would depend on one question: could he grow large enough for the world without cutting away the roots that made him different? Many artists begin by trying to fit in. They ask what the market wants, what radio accepts, what foreign audiences can understand, and what sounds safe. Burna Boy's path was more complicated. He wanted reach, but he also wanted ownership. He wanted people outside Africa to listen, but not because he had erased Africa from the center of the story. There is another detail in this beginning. A child who hears many sounds learns that identity can have layers. You can belong to one street, one family, one city, and one country, while also carrying a dream that points beyond all of them. That layered identity would later become one of the strongest parts of his music. Chapter 2. Building a Voice. A music career often looks sudden from far away. People see one song, one video, one viral moment, and imagine the rise was quick. But a voice is built slowly. It is built by listening, failing, trying new sounds, and learning which parts of yourself are decoration and which parts are essential. Burna Boy's early work mixed influences that did not always sit inside one easy box. There was dancehall energy, Afrobeat memory, Nigerian slang, reggae color, hip-hop confidence, and a voice that could sound relaxed and serious at the same time. This mixture would later be called Afrofusion, a word that helped explain the blend without trapping it. That blend was important because it gave him space. He did not have to choose only one lane. He could sing with melody, speak with swagger, build hooks for crowds, and still leave room for message and mood. He could make music for movement, but also music with identity behind it. This chapter is really about range. Burna Boy's range was not only vocal, it was cultural. He could sound local and international, intimate and public, playful and serious. That range made the music harder to explain, but easier to feel. The early years also required persistence. Every artist has moments when the world is not ready, when attention moves elsewhere, when a song does not travel far enough, or when people misunderstand the direction. Burna Boy had to keep shaping the voice before the world had a clear category for it. He had to trust that what sounded natural to him could eventually become powerful to others. The voice also needed emotional weight. A singer can have rhythm and still feel empty if there is no lived experience behind the rhythm. Burna Boy's strength came from sounding as if the party, the street, the family story, and the private ambition were all present at the same time. That is difficult to manufacture. Chapter 3: The Confidence of Identity. One of the strongest parts of Burna Boy's public image is confidence. But confidence can be misunderstood. Sometimes people think confidence means acting as if nothing can hurt you. In reality, confidence can also mean knowing what you represent, even when other people are slow to recognize it. For an African artist trying to expand globally, identity is not a small detail. It is the center of the challenge. The global music industry has often placed Western markets at the center and treated other regions as side stories. An artist from Nigeria may be asked to explain too much, simplify too much, or adjust too much. Burna Boy's rise pushed against that pattern. His music did not ask Africa to stand quietly in the background. The rhythm, language, fashion, references, and emotional temperature placed African identity in the foreground. He was not only trying to enter the global conversation, he was trying to change the sound of the room. This is why his story connects with more than music fans. It connects with anyone who has felt pressure to become easier for other people to accept. The question is simple but difficult. How much can you adapt without disappearing? Adaptation can be wise. Erasure is different. Burna Boy's career shows the tension between those two words. As his audience grew, that tension became part of the drama. Success outside Nigeria was not just about bigger numbers. It was about proof that a deeply African sound could travel without apology. Every new listener became part of a larger statement. Culture does not need permission to be valuable. This confidence did not mean closing the door to the world. It meant opening the door from a stronger position. He could collaborate, travel, learn, and experiment. But the center of gravity stayed clear. The music was not asking to be rescued by outside approval. It was asking the world to listen more carefully. Chapter 4: When the world started listening. Burna Boy's international breakthrough did not arrive because the world suddenly became generous. It arrived after years of work, stronger songs, clearer positioning, and a global audience that was becoming more open to African music. Streaming, social media, diaspora communities, festivals, and collaborations all helped widen the door. But a door opening is not the same as walking through it. Many artists receive a moment and lose it. Burna Boy used the moment to make the identity sharper. Songs reached listeners outside Nigeria, but the music still carried Nigerian and African energy. That balance made the rise feel less like a translation and more like an arrival. The album African Giant became an important symbol in this journey. The title itself carried a message. It suggested scale, pride, and refusal to be placed in a small category. It did not say, "Please notice me." It said, "Something large is already here." That kind of title can create pressure. If you call the work giant, the work must carry weight. The songs, visuals, performances, and message must support the claim. For Burna Boy, the project helped many international listeners understand that this was not a passing wave. It was part of a wider movement of African music, entering global attention with force. There is a lesson here about timing. Sometimes the world changes slowly, and preparation matters because you do not know when the opening will come. If the opening arrives and you are not ready, it passes. Burna Boy had been building sound, confidence, and audience long before many global listeners paid close attention. When the moment widened, he had something real to bring through it. Breakthrough also changes the listener's responsibility. Once people discover a sound from another culture, they can treat it like a temporary flavor or they can become curious about the world behind it. Burna Boy's rise invited listeners to move beyond the surface and hear pride, history, humor, resistance, and joy inside the rhythm. Chapter 5: Pressure After Recognition. Recognition is a beautiful thing, but it is not peace. Once the world starts listening, the pressure changes. Before recognition, an artist fights to be heard. After recognition, the artist fights to stay honest, while everyone has an opinion about the next move. For Burna Boy, global attention brought bigger stages, bigger expectations, and stronger comparisons. People wanted to know if he could keep rising, if the sound could keep traveling, if the message could remain strong, and if African music would be treated as a trend or as a permanent force. This is where discipline becomes less glamorous but more important. Performing internationally is not only about talent. It means travel, rehearsals, interviews, business decisions, public pressure, and the constant need to deliver energy even when the body is tired. The audience sees the performance, the artist lives the preparation. His Grammy recognition, including the win for Twice as Tall, became a milestone. Awards do not create the value of the music, but they can change how institutions respond to it. They can open doors, shift perception, and give a larger platform to a sound that was already powerful. Still, the deeper question remained: what do you do after the world applauds? Some artists soften their identity to keep access. Others become trapped by the version of themselves that first succeeded. Burna Boy's challenge was to keep expanding without becoming predictable, and to stay connected to the cultural force that made the expansion meaningful. Pressure after recognition is especially complex for a living artist, because the story is still moving. There is no final statue, no finished museum, no safe distance from the present. Every release becomes another test. Every performance becomes another chance for praise, doubt, misunderstanding, or growth. Chapter 6: Carrying Africa on Global Stages. When Burna Boy performs on global stages, the performance carries more than one person's ambition. For many listeners, it carries pride. It carries the feeling that African music is not waiting outside the main door anymore. It is inside, loud, stylish, confident, and impossible to ignore. That does not mean one artist represents an entire continent. Africa is too large, too diverse, and too complex for any single person to carry completely. But symbols matter. A global stage can turn one performance into a message. It can tell young artists that their accent, rhythm, language, and background are not obstacles. They can be sources of power. Burna Boy's success also belongs to a larger wave. Afrobeats and related African sounds have reached listeners around the world through many artists, producers, dancers, DJs, and communities. His story is one strong path inside a much bigger movement. That context matters because it keeps the story respectful. No movement is built by one person alone. Yet individual choices still matter. Burna Boy's role has been to bring a strong personal identity into that movement. The deep voice, the stage presence, the mix of pride and intensity, and the insistence on African centrality helped make his place recognizable. On global stages, words like roots, belonging, influence, representation, and global reach stopped being abstract. They became lived pressure. They described what happens when a person tries to become bigger without becoming disconnected. There is also a generational feeling in this stage. Young listeners may see the stage, the lights, and the confidence, but underneath that image is a message about possibility. The lesson is not that everyone must become famous. The lesson is that your background can become material for strength, not a reason to apologize. Chapter 7: The Cost of Staying Original. Originality is attractive after it succeeds. Before it succeeds, originality can feel risky. People may not understand it. They may ask for something simpler. They may want the artist to sound more familiar, more polished in a predictable way, or more comfortable for audiences who do not want to work too hard. Burna Boy's career shows that staying original has a cost. It requires patience when categories are too small. It requires courage when people misunderstand confidence as arrogance. It requires focus when the global industry wants clear labels and fast explanations. There is also an emotional cost. When you carry identity publicly, criticism can feel personal. If people reject the sound, are they rejecting the music, the culture, the attitude, or the place behind it? The answer is not always clear. That uncertainty can make success feel heavy, but the reward of originality is deep when it works. It does not only create popularity, it creates recognition. People do not just hear a song, they recognize a world. They recognize a point of view. They recognize that the artist is not borrowing confidence from somewhere else. This is why Burna Boy's story is useful beyond music. Many people are trying to build lives in spaces that were not designed for them. They must decide what to adjust and what to protect. They must learn the language of the room without losing the language of home. That balance is difficult, but it can become a source of power. The cost is easier to respect when you understand what is being protected. Originality is not stubbornness for its own sake. It is the decision to keep the living center of the work intact. For Burna Boy, that center is rhythm, African pride, personal confidence, and the feeling that global success should not require cultural silence. Chapter 8. A Voice That Traveled Without Leaving Home. By the time Burna Boy became a global name, the most important part of the story was not only distance traveled, it was what remained. The voice still carried Nigeria. The rhythm still carried African memory. The image still carried pride. The ambition became global, but the center did not vanish. That is the emotional lesson of this episode. Success is not always about escaping where you come from. Sometimes success is about carrying it better. It is about refining the sound, strengthening the message, learning the business, and still allowing the roots to be visible. Burna Boy's journey reminds us that identity can be a strategy, not a limitation. Culture can be a language, rhythm can be a passport, and confidence can grow from the decision to stop treating your origin as something you must explain away. This kind of story is powerful because it shows how identity, pressure, representation, ambition, and belonging become real inside a human life. It is not only a biography, it is the sound of a person building a voice and then protecting it under brighter lights. The final lesson is simple. If you want to reach the world, you may need to learn new rooms, new systems, and new expectations. But the strongest version of you may still come from the place you were once told to soften. Burna Boy's story shows that a voice can travel far and still sound like home. This was another story from the English Vault, a story about rhythm, identity, and the courage to become global without becoming empty. I will see you in the next one.